Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I'm Andrew Scaff. He's Mike Mormon. Today we're going to talk a little more about the NCAA tournaments and our not so hot brackets on the men's side, but pretty decent turnout on the women's side for our predictions. We'll get into some more off-season NFL news. And then we're going to be shifting into Major League Baseball, and it's opening day coming up here. Actually, will be, by the time this airs, today.
Yeah, on Thursday, March 30th is opening day. And are you going to be at opening day?
I will be there in my
And do you know
Royals
who
gear and rooting for my hometown team. Yes.
the Royals are playing?
What's that?
Do you know who the Royals are playing on opening day?
The Minnesota Twins.
Minnesota Twins.
3:10 p.m. afternoon game. It's supposed to actually be nice. It's been like cold and rainy for I'm going to say about a whole month right now, possibly 10 years. I'm not sure.
Supposedly the full powder blue uniforms are making their return
Yeah,
as their home. I think they're going to be worn at home though, rather than on the road. Which
yeah. Well,
I don't
usually
know.
that'd be like the alternate uniforms. They'd just
Yeah,
wear it like on Saturday afternoon games or Saturday evening games. I think is what it is. Yeah.
but would you prefer them to switch to just powder blue on the road rather than the gray, or do you like the gray better?
I mean, they've been using the gray for a long time. It just seems like that's what their tradition is now. But it seems like they should just wear the powder blues as much as they can, right? What do you
I
think?
think so too. I think so too. They have been wearing a lot of powder blue shirts and with the white pants, or sometimes maybe even with the gray pants. I think they usually wear if they wear the alternate jersey with the gray pants, they wear the darker uh,
Yeah.
royal
I haven't
blue.
seen if they're keeping their alternate logo though too with the
Oh,
fountain
the
logo.
fountain, that was kind of cool.
Oh, that was kind of neat. I hope they're keeping that one around. I haven't paid attention.
Yeah, we'll have to find out. We'll see how it goes this year, and if the games are actually broadcast anywhere because of the seeming demise of
So
the Valley Sports network.
I think is filed for bankruptcy.
Hmm.
I guess MLB has said that they're going to broadcast the games for free if Bally's is no longer able to broadcast. That's what they've said.
Okay.
Will they though?
Yeah, the Royals traditionally get very high ratings, local ratings for their baseball games. So it's
Locally, at least anyway.
yeah,
But it's still like not very big compared to many of the other markets. So, but
well, like ratings are high, but
in
we don't have
market
a
share,
population. Yeah,
it's
it's
very high.
small.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
It's
small
like much
country.
higher in for market share in Kansas City than almost every other market, I guess.
Even what about St. Louis? That's where the best fans in baseball are.
Garbage. They're garbage. The city, the fans, and all of it, right? Panera, who I just found out
Panera,
is
yeah,
St.
St.
Louis
Louis. I
today.
told you that earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah, the St. Louis Bread Company is
garbage. All
Panera.
garbage.
But if you really dislike them, you should take advantage of their social outreach policy and go to. Like, I don't know if it's all the Paneras, but some of them you can go and pay what you want for food, which means perhaps zero. So because it's supposed to help the homeless and things like that. So I think if you go to like an urban-ish Panera, that's where they usually are. So
Hmm.
I'd have to look that up, but
Still not the best place to go
yeah,
anyway.
maybe it's not around anymore. Oh, they it seems like they closed. They closed uh their last pay what you can restaurant.
Huh.
Um yeah, the
Well,
pay
let's
what you want it was a fail. Yeah.
let's let's jump into our March Madness
March Madness.
discussion, Mike.
It's been
I
pretty
believe
mad.
we put 22 brackets together.
Good.
How many Final Four teams did we get out of that?
Well, I got zero in my 16, and I was recently made aware that you were the only one to get any of the Final Four teams right, and it was on perhaps your worst bracket, where you, I believe, had all of the lower seeded teams win round one, and then all of the nine seeded teams advance to the Final Four. We had, of course, one nine seed team in the Final Four. That was Florida Atlantic. So yeah, that was your bracket. Are you proud that you were the only one correct, uh, or does it how does it hit you?
Well, that was the. It's funny that's the bracket that ended up with the one correct pick, because that was the jokiest of the brackets anyway. So it wasn't intended to be anything good, other than just for the fact that you'd be able to say that you picked all these. That one bracket had all the crazy upsets correct, and then
Yeah,
it didn't matter after that. It's funny that that's the one that ended up with a correct Final Four.
yeah, it was terrible. We, we had several different methods. None of them ended up really getting anything close to right. Our current winning bracket in our group is my straightforward bracket, and I guess technically it has actually won the group because even your Florida Atlantic team, I think, was predicted to lose this game. So even if they
Yeah.
win, you don't get any points.
Well, so that was the first of the games in that bracket that I had to do something to pick, because it wasn't just like going off of which number is lower in this case, because it got to the nines facing each other, so I had to actually flip a coin, and so
Did you
that
really
so
did you
then
really flip a coin? Or
I
did you
did flip
use
a coin.
you did flip a coin there. You used the
I cheated
regular
on the full bracket.
here you flipped. What
Yeah,
kind of coin did you use?
I used a quarter.
A quarter.
I believe it was this quarter.
So
Yes,
that's what
a 2021 quarter. That's probably because it's 2 years old. So
yeah, it didn't do its job in the final four, but at least you used a coin there rather than resorting to technology,
yeah.
like you're wont to do. But so
So
that was the only Final Four team we got, that Florida Atlantic in that break. So we had 88 Final Four teams in our 22 brackets, and one out of 88 was correct. So it's
hey,
just over 1% correct.
yeah, yes. So, but this was the year that picking chalk was terrible.
It was
So no one seed made it into the Elite Eight even,
no one seed made the Elite Eight.
and
No two or three seed even made to the Final Four. Only the 4 seed Yukon Huskies is the number one, is the highest ranked seed left. We have a 5 in Miami uh, Hurricanes, 5 with San Diego State Aztecs, I believe, and Florida Atlantic Owls, 9 seed. I believe it's
I
the
have no
Owls.
idea who
I believe it's
Florida
the Florida Atlantic Owls.
Owls. That is correct.
So we have the Owls, Aztecs, Hurricanes, Huskies. So of those mascots, which of those mascots would win?
We'd think Aztecs would have to defeat an owl. I would
But
think
would they somehow believe the owl has great wisdom and not want to destroy a magnificent bird?
they wouldn't lose to the bird though.
Well, maybe they would let the bird defeat them. No,
It was a
you think
pretty
the Aztec would
powerful.
win? You think the
They,
Aztec would
they
win?
weren't
Okay, cool.
defeated by animals before the
They were big on
conquistadors showed up.
human sacrifice, things like that. Unless
Yeah,
the owl carried some sort of avian disease that
true,
that the pre-Columbian Aztec was susceptible to.
possible.
That could be a problem.
I would assume the Aztecs would defeat the owls.
They would take one of their obsidian knives and carve out the heart of said owl
Kalimas.
in a ceremony.
That's not the right society, but
That was an Indiana Jones Temple of Doom. That's the wrong Indian. Uh,
right.
okay, so you think the Aztec would win over an owl? Okay,
But
how
then
about a
I think Hurricanes win everything else though.
hurricane over a husky? Hurricane? Yeah.
Yeah,
It reminds me of the Superfans when in on Saturday Night Live, the Bears,
yeah,
when they were debating on who would win in a fight, Ditka or a hurricane,
yes.
and they all picked Ditka, but then someone said, "What if the hurricane is Hurricane Ditka?" and, and then someone went with go with the hurricane, Bob, type of thing. So I think Husky. You think the husky is a winter dog? a hurricane's a tropical storm
Yes.
of
They should
tremendous
never come in
force.
contact with each other, but
You get a lot of dogs that are missing and lost and presumed dead after big natural disasters. So I guess you would say a hurricane probably kills more dogs than dogs kill hurricanes. So you would say hurricane.
I
And
don't know. I'm trying to think of a scenario where a dog beats a hurricane, like defeats a hurricane, like actually like makes the hurricane go home. Basically, I don't. I
yeah,
don't.
well, maybe you could say, well, huskies are in Alaska or the wilderness, and hurricanes could never make it up there because it's too cold. The elements
Yeah.
are too difficult for a hurricane to survive in. Only a husky could survive in
Ooh.
those northern climes. Even an Aztec probably wouldn't be able to survive very long there. So if it's, I guess it depends on where the game is being played, whether the husky
Right.
or the hurricane
These are
would
all
win.
neutral
But
sites.
but remember, this game is in Houston, Texas, near Galveston, Texas, which of course has been wiped out historically by hurricanes in the past. So I would say in Houston, the hurricane would defeat a husky. If this were in Anchorage, I'd go different, but
Hurricane wouldn't even make it up there.
no. So I think hurricane, even with global warming, I don't think a hurricane would do quite as well. So if we were
We'll have to
going
check in on that in a few hundred years or so.
so if we were going purely
Mascot
mascots
based.
based on geographical location, uh, so I would say hurricane beats husky. Aztec still defeats owl, I would say. But then in Houston, I would say a hurricane would noble Aztec civilization, or would an Aztec be able to cover up in some sort of um, strongly built temple pyramid
Just
type of
weather the
thing?
storm.
Weather the storm. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say?
So I'd still go Hurricanes if we're just going purely mascot based. Yes.
Okay. So you're picking. So then does that mean you're picking that Miami is going to win this tournament?
No, not at all. I don't usually pick mascot based reasonings. I don't know. That's not my style anyway.
So you like I think the odds makers like UConn, and so you are thinking UConn probably as well.
Yeah, I think so because they were so dominant in about all their games they played in the tournament so far,
Yeah,
and
they
they're
beat.
not going to face any of the absolute top teams that were expected to be in the this far into the tournament. But they did take out Gonzaga quite handily.
Yeah, you
8 point
yeah
victory.
yeah. So UConn has, well, the teams that they have beaten were Iona, uh, who are, do you know their mascot? Rick Pitino coached them.
I was gonna say the fighting Rick Pitino's, but I don't
Well, you could say
know.
it's related in some way to a hurricane, but it's spelled differently. It means something different. It's the Gales, Gaels, the
Okay.
Gales of Iona.
Patino is already leaving though, right? Isn't
He's
he?
going
St.
to
John's?
St. John's, the Red Storm. So he's leaving a minor wind, if you want to spell it Gale, for a larger Red Storm. And
Yes.
of course,
Full
the
blown
St. John's.
storm, not just a breeze,
But they
but
used to be the St. John's Red Men. They used to be Indians. So again, it all circles back to the Aztec hurricane uh,
there you go.
analogy, where in this case the Native Americans have become the storm that they could not defeat in
Oh,
your universe. But uh, then they beat St. Mary's. Do you know what St. Mary's mascot is?
I don't.
It's also the Gales. They would have played two Gales, Gael. So it's possible that Iona and St. Mary's could have matched up and been the Gales against the
Ooh,
Gales. It's like Gaelic kind of Gale, Gael,
yeah,
and that would have been the craziest uh, matchup, I think,
of
uh,
mascots
of mascots, right?
that we didn't do, but could have done
Yeah,
in our brackets methodologies.
yeah, the Gales. So the Gales against the Gales. I thought about that in one of my things, but I didn't. I couldn't see two Gales. That would have been worlds colliding. I don't think the Gales can play the Gales. I think it's a
Yeah,
But so they beaten the Gales, two Gales. So a Husky, you think maybe could maul a human being.
Sure.
They also beat in the next round. They beat the Razorbacks. So a wild boar they were able to defeat, which I'm not sure about that. But I guess a Husky is a carnivore and more so than a wild boar, which is sort of an omnivore, I guess you could say. They kind of
Yeah.
eat anything, but
But they are
um,
fairly aggressive though.
yeah.
But they can be.
And then they beat the domesticated Gonzaga Bulldogs. So Husky, I think, is bigger than a bulldog, and the
Yep.
average bulldog, I believe, is more inbred and um, not as agile as
Did you watch
Husky.
Silicon Valley
I
TV show?
did.
Do you remember the Gavin Belson example? He brings an animal into the board meetings and like um he does a whole speech about consider the bulldog. He has this hideous beast that's inbred to the point where it's like constantly you know snotty and
Yeah,
can't breathe, and yes,
I remember Gavin Belson. He
yeah,
was
right,
Cooley chairman
that's
and
right.
founder, but he never.
CEO. Yeah,
Yeah, so it was anyway. The Huskies have defeated every other mascot coming their way, and they've won handily. They won, I think, every game by at least 15 points. That was the low. The St. Mary's was only 15-point win, and then the other three were over 20 points. So
yeah.
even defeating my Razorbacks handily, they got a hot start, and Arkansas couldn't come back. So you think the Huskies will similarly overwhelm the Hurricanes,
I think so.
and then they would play either the Aztecs or the Owls. Do you have a? I believe you made picks for each of those two games,
I
right?
did.
Do you recall what the spreads were in those games? So
I do.
should we regale the audience uh,
Sure.
in how our betting? So we each lost $800 basically with our Final Four teams.
Right.
I had a possibility of winning even into last weekend, but both Gonzaga and K State lost in the final eight.
Yeah.
Houston was my double pick, and they lost the Sweet 16. So I had a decent shot
Yep.
in getting those three final eight teams. I got more than I think any other bracket in our group.
Yep.
Um, I defeated the Pomeroy rankings. I defeated Sagarin rankings. The only one that had as many as me was yours. Where it had field goal percentage as your metric for making the Elite Eight, and that was also one of your teams. That was also a bracket where you had Florida Atlantic in the Elite Eight, but you had them, alas, losing to Oral Roberts.
Yes. I mean,
And
I didn't. The methodology
the
had.
methodology did it. And then Oral
Yeah.
Roberts actually was
I did
playing.
not pick these things. I chose the methodology.
Well, Oral Roberts actually made it to the Final Four in that bracket,
Yeah.
as did Colgate,
Who
and
would have been the champion because they had the best.
Gonzaga and Arizona were the other two. So none of those teams were. But yeah, Colgate would have been the champion. Um, Colgate's mascot.
I just assumed it was toothpaste related, but I'm chances are I'm not correct.
It's not toothpaste related. It should be. I think that's a missed opportunity. And they are
Like the
the
wintergreens, maybe? Or the hmm. Yeah, what should it be?
they are the Colgate Raiders.
Hmm.
It
Incorrect.
used to be the
They did it
Colgate
wrong.
Red Raiders, but
I
apparently
guess so.
Red had a not communist interpretation, but a Native American interpretation. So they dropped the red.
Hmm.
I would have thought maybe in the fifth, Cincinnati Reds, they became in the 50s when during the height of McCarthyism. Do you remember what the Reds became briefly?
No.
The Reds became Cincinnati Reds changed the name to Cincinnati Red Legs. So they
Oh, was
were
it then?
a version of the Red Sox.
Oh, they
Or
started
Red
as
Sox.
the Red Legs. Is that
Maybe they did. Maybe that's why they
they just
started.
pulled it
But
back? I
Yeah, it
thought maybe
was
they changed it to something completely different during that era, just to make sure there's
uh,
no correlation.
yeah. So they were the Red Legs, 1954 to 58, and they were the Red Stockings, I guess, original.
Oh, the Red Stockings.
But I
Okay.
guess but also I guess Boston was probably the Red Stockings as well, so they became the
Yeah.
Red Sox. And I think it's interesting that those teams, the Red Sox and the White Sox, both latched on to the X as meaning CKS
Yeah.
very, very early on in um, you'd think that's like a cool updated kind of spelling, but it was something that goes back uh, many um, centuries. So yeah, Boston Red Sox SOX were spelled SOX since 1908. They were the Boston Americans before that.
Really.
Yes. And when do you think the White Sox became the White Sox SOX before or after the Red Sox became the Red Sox SOX? So 1908 was Red Sox. When do you think White Sox became White Sox with the X
Well, I
ending?
know they were the SOX Sox in the Black Sox era,
Mm-hmm.
which was 1918, 1918, 1919.
1919 White Sox,
And
yeah.
so they were already that by then, but that's still after. I'll say it was after 1908.
They were okay, so they started out as the Chicago White Stockings. Their
Yeah.
first year playing was 1900. They stopped being the White Stockings in 1903. 1904 was their first season. They were the White Sox SOX. So each of the Sox teams have been spelled SOX for more
Over
than
over 100 years.
over 100 years. This will be the 120th season that the White Sox will be the White
So
Sox with X.
what were they in that one year?
I think
1903
I think
04.
I think it was just the seasons that they played under. So like
Oh.
Chicago White Stockings were 1900 through 1903, and then for the 1904 season they switched to Sox.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought there was like I thought it meant there was like a 1 year where
Mm,
there was something else.
No, I don't
No.
think so. Yeah, I
I
don't
think it
know
was maybe
when.
just the way that you said it. It made me think that, but I didn't realize.
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. This is one of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, but originally they started out as the Sioux City Cornhuskers of the Western League, minor league of the National League. Then Charles Comiskey bought the Cornhuskers, moved them to St. Paul, Minnesota, where they became the St. Paul Saints, and then moved them to Chicago. They became the White Stockings, uh, which was also apparently the former name of the Chicago Cubs, who at that point, when the White Sox moved to Chicago, were known as the Chicago Orphans, which was a
Naturally.
little strange. Do you think they were? Why would you think they were called the orphans? Because of the plucky toughness of orphan children, or because maybe they lost their lease on a stadium and
Yeah.
were forced to play in vacant lots or something like that?
Yeah,
What would you?
maybe. Yeah, maybe they just lost their home. They had to move around enough that they were more orphan-like.
Yeah, um, they were the Colts, and
Or they just rallying around one particular
oh,
player.
they were called the Orphans because of famed racist and great 19th century baseball player Cap Anson. They were sometimes called Cap Anson's Colts, Chicago Colts or Anson's Colts. Then when Anson left, he was the father of that team. They became the Orphans because they no
Oh.
longer had their domineering racist father and became the Orphans briefly before becoming um, uh, the before becoming the Chicago Cubs in 1903. They were the White Stockings from 1876 to 1889.
You
That's
think any memorabilia exists from the orphans days?
I bet you could find it on certain like you know, what are those
Retro
like on
throwback.
Etsy or something like that maybe
Do
or
you think the White Sox have ever done like a retro day where they've worn their old orphans
yeah, I looked
uniforms?
up Chicago orphans shopping. There are Chicago orphans. You can find them on Redbubble or uh, different things.
Really?
had a kind of a cool C logo,
Hmm.
uh, like an old English style C, Chicago Orphans.
Is
Um,
it better than the Cleveland Spiders logos?
well, nothing. I don't. I think the Orphans is. I think. Yeah. I think if we had to pick the best nicknames of the those old time teams, it would be the Orphans probably for Chicago. It would be the Spiders for the Guardians, the
Yeah.
lamest of all the new nicknames. Just because they didn't, they were just paying for the, they didn't want to pay for a whole new nickname. They only wanted to pay for a few letters of a new nickname.
So
And
stupid.
um, yeah, I think so. The Detroit has always been the Tigers from 1901 on. I think the New York Yankees were once the New York Highlanders. So if you like the movie Highlander,
Yes.
perhaps Highlanders would be your pick. Um, uh, I think the Dodgers had some funny nicknames early on. They were the
Ones.
yes, they were the. So these are different ones you could pick. So for the Dodgers, they were actually called the Trolley Dodgers for a while because that's what the word Dodger was because they were by the trolley lines. Um, they were also the Brooklyn Superbas from 1899 1910. They were also variations between they were called the Brooklyn Bridegrooms or the Brooklyn Grooms for over a decade. Uh,
That's
uh,
awesome.
would you? I think the Bridegrooms is pretty funny as a team name. Uh, they were the Brooklyn Robins for a little while, Brooklyn Grays, Atlantics. So I'd say the Bridegrooms, I think, is their funniest one. I think
Yeah.
Grooms is funny, but I think Bridegrooms is a little funnier because it's more old timey than just saying groom.
Yeah.
Uh, um,
Bridegrooms. Did you know
San
that
Francisco,
the Giants started as the Gothams?
the Gothams. That's very Batman-y. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was only 2 seasons, looks like, but were the Yankees always the Yankees?
They were the Highlanders, I think I
Oh
mentioned,
yeah,
right?
you just said that. You just said that.
Yeah. Um, right. I think I don't know if it says that on Wikipedia. I remember they were the Highlanders. Um,
Boston Americans.
well, I bet you probably like so the Atlanta Braves, of course, used to be the Milwaukee Braves, and they used to be the Boston Braves, but they were also for a while the Boston Rustlers, Boston Doves, probably your favorite coming up, the Boston Bean Eaters,
Yes, the Bean Eaters.
Red Caps or Red Stockings. They were also at one point. So I think the Bean Eaters is probably the best one of those too. Um, uh, the Cardinals probably had. I wonder if they had some interesting old names. Yes, they do. One year, so they used to be the St. Louis Browns, but then the Browns came later. Uh, and for one year in 1899, they're the St. Louis Perfectos. So they could have played
Yeah.
the Brooklyn Superbas and fought against the Perfectos. And then they became the Cardinals in 1900. So I think
Yeah.
the Perfectos is the name they should have uh, stuck with. And anyway, we're on a big tangent here. So we were going back to the Final Four, right? And you had the games predicted. So we had each made interesting bets on the Final Four because we already lost
Yeah.
$800 made up money on our two bracket Final Four. So neither of us got any of the teams right. If K State had gotten, even if just K State had made it, I would have made $1,200, and I would have profited. Or if Gonzaga, I think it was plus 550 or something, I would have gotten at least a lot of the money back. And if
Yeah.
both, or
Then,
either way.
then I think I had the last chance with Texas.
Yeah, I thought for sure
And
Texas
they
was going to handle
and
it,
then
but
they blew a 13-point lead in the last 10 minutes of the game and dropped, out basically where I still had them as champions. So had they won that game, I think I would have
yeah,
had the possibility at least to win the whole bracket challenge. But with my own picks against the methodologies that we selected though too. Well, after now, having closing out the brackets, because there's no more points available left for either of us. Has this changed your strategy for picking future games?
Not really. I think, yeah, this was like, I don't know. I guess you could just say maybe pick chaos, but I think usually they aren't this chaotic. And I guess I kind of figured that I'm pretty good at the first round, but then after that everything's crapshoot. And so I think I'm just gonna pick with my own brain, but maybe take into effect was in the second round especially, maybe take in the computer rankings a little bit more.
A little heavier
Uh
in the second round, maybe over the first round.
yeah, and then
That is how it looked like it worked in this tournament. Was
yeah,
that however much chaos there was in the first round, it seemed to level out a bit in the second round, but then it
but then it went
became chaotic
crazy
again
and
afterwards. So,
yeah.
um, but I mean, realistically, are you surprised that a single-minded methodology wasn't better than your own strategy that you use? Because you yourself are probably using a combination of strategies when you pick your bracket.
Yeah, I think one strategy that might have actually been a really good strategy to use, and this would have gotten me teams like Florida Atlantic, maybe even San Diego State or Miami, was best record, because Florida Atlantic I think only lost 2 or 3 games this year. They might have
Yeah,
that might have been the best record. That was probably the best record in their bracket. Miami had a very probably competitive record total. I think they were like 29-7. Connecticut ended up being like 29-8. So like they ended up not losing a ton. So like maybe I could have maybe better record could have been a
but then
uh
like the schools from like the smaller conferences maybe weighted more heavily than they probably could be
yeah.
because their opponents wouldn't be as strong either. So maybe it's best record amongst games played against teams in the field. Maybe I'm not sure how to do that. It seems like it's got to be a combination of things to be the best chance, at least anyway. But there's still going to be
Yeah.
chaos no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Now
I think
on the women's side, though, I think the bracket that's doing the best or nearly the best was one the methodology that you used of the best player.
yeah, that has actually worked very well.
That
It
seems like that's a pretty good idea anyway, because the games are fairly dominated by individuals. Usually, if a player is very good, that player will help their team so much that the team will win. Especially like looking at like Iowa's
mhm.
path to get to the Final Four on the women's side with was it Caitlin Clark?
With Caitlin Clark. Yeah, that was one of the reasons I did that was because I wanted to figure out a way to get Iowa to win, because most of my methods were going to be South Carolina, because South Carolina was so dominant in a lot of different areas. And um, Caitlin Clark, I think, was by far the best player this year, probably last year too, even though she didn't win the award. But like, she was leading. If you lead the league and if you lead the whole country in both scoring and assists, you're probably the best player. And if you get like
Yeah.
8 rebounds a game besides that, like, I don't think there's a lot, especially if you're playing in a big conference like the Big Ten. I don't think there's probably any argument really there.
Right.
Like, even though they would say it was Aaliyah Boston from South Carolina, but she was just like the best, sort of maybe the best player, the best team, was just sort of a big, just sort of a, I kind of, to me, just sort of a nondescript big player who gets quite a few, a decent amount of points, decent amount of rebounds, and then has a solid team around her. And I
Yeah.
didn't think that was, it wasn't like she was scoring like 30 points a game and getting 15 boards. It was like 14 points, 12 rebounds or something every game, which is, I think adequate, but not amazing in the way that Clark was. So I think Clark is like, I was looking at her stats, like they really dwarf even some of like the great women's basketball players of the year. Like if you look at Diana Taurasi's stats, or I
Yeah.
was thinking like Cheryl Swoops, women, she's probably a little closer to but she filled up the box score even a lot more than either of those players. So I think yeah, so I found her very impressive, and I think Iowa has some other good players too. But so I thought, that's the way to get Iowa to win. I still think South Carolina's probably the best team. So if South Carolina wins, um, I think your bracket right now has the best chance of winning the of our women's group. If South Carolina loses to Iowa in this next round, that best player bracket with me will win. So
Yeah,
it comes down to that one game where
which is the first of the Final Four matchups too. Is it not? Is that right?
yeah, Iowa I think is favored by or
South
is
Carolina
down
favored
is
by
down by 11 and a
11.
half on the
Yeah,
spread, right?
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Are you disappointed that that matchup happens in the Final Four rather than the championship game?
A little bit, yeah, because I think especially with UConn out, since Virginia Tech ended up winning that bracket, UConn lost to I don't remember who they lost to. It was Ohio State. Ohio State. Um, so like, yeah, the
Who
idea
then
would be
ended up
maybe
losing
kind of
also, right?
badly. Yeah,
To LSU?
LSU ended up beating India. They won the other one. So like, it's LSU and Virginia Tech on one
Right.
side, and then Iowa. Yeah, I think the Iowa South Carolina matchups by far
You would
the more
assume that
attractive.
that is the championship game being played right there, right? Yeah.
I possibly, yeah, because um I think if Iowa beats South Carolina, they'll beat either of the other teams. And I think if South Carolina beats Iowa, I don't think they'll have trouble. I don't think they'll have trouble. It's like with the other two
Well, they're
either. So
they're big favorites, and yeah,
yeah. So
I mean they were favored versus the field before the tournament started. South Carolina was right.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see what happens there.
No,
We actually made betting picks for the men's Final Four. We want to talk about our strategy there, and then
sure.
um, maybe wait till next week and talk more about basketball if we want. Um,
So I went pretty straightforward. That's and since we were both were terrible, um, and we both lost $800
so we
essentially.
so we so we gave it $200 in the Final Four to make it an even $1,000 that we can lose.
Yes,
Right. And so,
right.
how did you allocate your $200?
So I wanted to pick on games that existed already, so I wasn't like betting too far in the future. That may not even I may lose before the outcome of the first round games are finished, right? So I wanted to go ahead and bet on the two Final Four games, and I'm extremely boring on these picks. I'm just going to pick the favorite on the spread on both of the games. So San Diego State -1.5 and UConn -5.5. That is my brilliant strategy
So,
for attacking these Final Four betting opportunities.
so you can either win $200, lose
Yes,
$200, or possibly break even.
like even yes. Those are my
Um,
those are my three scenarios.
I made mine a little more complicated. I took the futures odds and I looked at the other four teams. So right now, Connecticut is favored against the field. So you to win if you bet to win $100, you have to bet $125. So they're minus 125. So I decided not to bet on them. I think just because this has been crazy um, all season now, and especially in the tournament, I'm going to pick. I decided to put my bets on the field, but I also maybe dumbly didn't want to place $200 on the field. I'm just on the field to win. That actually might have won me more if they won. If I bet, but I would also be. I don't know. I wouldn't feel like I got the correct answer if I just bet $200 on the field. I have a possibility though of winning more than $200 the way I went. Um, so I decided. So we had $200. I decided to bet $100 on the team that had the longest odds, and that was Florida Atlantic. They're plus 550, which I'm a little surprised that they're plus 550 because I don't. They're an underdog against San Diego State, which makes not that much sense to me. Even though San Diego State's a higher seed, but like they're not a big conference school. They're from, they're not traditional power. So I guess Kawhi Leonard went to San Diego State at one point. But, you know, Port Atlanta's only lost 3 games this year. They've kind of rolled through the field.
He's not still on that team,
Yeah, no,
so
he's not still on that team. Yeah, so if I plus 550. So I bet $100 on Florida Atlantic, and I decided to split my other 100 between San Diego State and Miami. And so I bet 50 on each of those. I think Miami is plus um
450.
450 and San Diego State's plus 390. So I'll get a small. So if I bet $50 each of those. So if Miami or San Diego State wins, I get a small win, $45 or $75 total. And if I get Florida Atlantic to win, I'm plus 450. So I will be in the money if the field wins. If Connecticut wins, I'm down $200. So I have the low of you, but I have three possibilities of being plus money. So I decided to go that way. And there's a one, and I think, and I kind of actually think Florida Atlantic has a really good shot because um, they've played so well all year, it seems like. And
Yeah, so you have four potential outcomes.
yes,
If Florida Atlantic wins, you beat me no matter what happens. Whatever I do, you'll defeat my strategy.
that's right. The best you can do if Florida Atlantic wins is break even because you have Florida Atlantic losing the first
Right.
round.
Right. That's right. Yeah. But I mean, but even if somehow, which isn't possible, your max would be more than the $400 that I could earn anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But also, my max would actually be 200 in the scenario when
Yeah.
you won, so it doesn't matter.
If I guess ideally you could say three-fourths of the time I will win. If you think it's a close, which I think
If they're all
maybe
even, yeah,
I will be above. I will be above five. I will be in plus money.
Yeah.
One fourth. That one fourth I lose 200, but maybe it's really 40% of the time I will lose 200, and then 60% of the time I will.
Odds makers seem to think that Connecticut is the favorite, as they are they are favored versus the field, minus 125.
Do you know? So Miami was in the ACC. Connecticut's in the Big East. So in basketball, those are two big
Florida
conferences.
Atlantic is Conference USA.
Is that right?
I think San Diego State is WCC.
Yeah,
Florida Atlantic is Conference USA.
yeah. And yeah, West Coast Conference, so Gonzaga's conference is as San Diego State. Um,
No, Mountain West.
Mountain West. Oh,
Yeah,
I think maybe we're thinking of Santa Clara or something like that for West Coast Conference.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, there was a team from the West Coast.
St. Mary's, the Gales,
That was
were West Coast too. Mountain West, yeah. So it's interesting that I think UConn is historically in the Big East, but it's interesting because now the Big East, the way it's arranged, none of the Big East teams are public universities except for UConn. They're all private. Every one of them except Butler is Catholic
Right.
and private. And
Because
then we have
it was the Catholic schools all stayed in the Big East, right? And
yeah,
the non-Catholic schools jumped to the ACC. Isn't that how that realignment
yeah.
went?
And then I guess UConn went back. Is that how it worked?
And then UConn went back. Yeah.
Yeah, because UConn, I think its football team never went or something. I'm not exactly sure how.
Yeah, that's
It remained independent. But yeah, so Butler is, I believe, Presbyterian, um, Lutheran. Let's see. What do you know, Butler University? It doesn't say. It was a Northwestern. It was founded by the Disciples of Christ, but now it's independent, private. So, but anyway, and I'd say majority of those Catholic schools are Jesuit institutions. Xavier, Georgetown, Creighton, Mark, Marquette, even. Yeah, it's an interesting mix of those Catholic basketball schools.
Is St. John's in that group too? Or is that somewhere else?
Yeah, St. John's is in the Big East.
Yeah, that's what I thought so.
I think they're. I want to say they're Dominican. St. John's. No, the Congregation of the Mission. So that's a Vincentian fathers. Okay. So they're the Vincentian. So St. Vincent de Paul. He's if you know thrift stores, the Vincent de Paul Society has a lot of Catholic thrift stores in across the country, especially in the Northeast. They're one of the big thrift store
All right.
bodies. But anyway, so those are our final four teams, and we'll see how it turns out next week. Do we have any other final closing thoughts on basketball? Or do we want to switch over to the NFL
Yes,
for a
sir.
little bit before we finish with baseball?
Yes, just maybe just the last thing to say on the basketball tournaments are men's games are Saturday, and then the final is Monday. And the women's tournament, the semifinals are on Friday night. Final on Sunday night, I believe, right?
Okay, yeah. So men's tournament was the day before, but now it's the day after tradition because it's
Mhm.
traditionally the Saturday is the final four day and Monday is the national championship.
Championship, yeah.
Um, so on Saturday and Monday, by this point, those are also traditional sort of football playing days, I guess, as is Sunday, of course. The NFL, probably the biggest. So there hasn't been a lot of movement in terms of free agency. Aaron Rodgers still hasn't gone officially to the Jets.
Although he has
March.
declared that is his intention is to play for the Jets, but it's not really up to him at this point.
If you were the New York Jets, would you take Aaron Rodgers for one, possibly 2 years, or would you make a play for Aaron Rodgers? I mean for Lamar Jackson. Would you make a play for Lamar Jackson?
I don't know what the cost is going to be for Aaron Rodgers. That's what it comes down to, right? Is the cost for Lamar Jackson is going to be 2 number 1 draft picks just to make the trade or to make the buyout for making an offer, plus his supposed like 10 year $250+ million contract that he wants.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's worth it. I
I
wouldn't do that, but
I think well you're gonna give up. I don't know. I think it's a second round pick and maybe a couple other things for Rodgers, but it's gonna be two firsts. I'd say like you might get Jackson over
I
five
don't.
six years.
Yeah, I don't know what Rogers' cost is going to be, but that we know what the Lamar Jackson cost is
He
going
has
to be
two
roughly,
firsts and
plus a
40
roughly 10 year
million.
commitment.
Maybe he would do five. Maybe he would do.
But he wanted that contract that Deshaun Watson got,
Yeah.
basically all
I
guaranteed and a very long term. That was what he was asking for.
I wonder. Yes, I think Deshaun Watson only got 5 years for 50 each, so I think he's 250. So like maybe you could do 550. Like maybe you could do. This is something maybe you could say. Well, maybe we'll do 30. Maybe we'll escalate 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and not guarantee the last couple. I guess that would just be that would be 40 million 3 years guaranteed under 20 plus, and then maybe restructure it somewhere. You can get a new
Yeah,
deal. I don't know. It's like Jackson is it's stupid. He doesn't have an agent. It's stupid that he
that's his
is
choice.
trying to go this idea that the owners do not want to make everything guaranteed.
Yeah,
Plus, everybody thinks since Cleveland is a bunch of idiots for wanting Watson and all the off-field problems he has. Lamar Jackson also has had injury problems the last couple of years. So like it makes sense why people are reluctant to really give him this huge deal, especially given the fact that a lot of these big deals lately, like Kyler Murray and stuff, haven't turned out good, and they've really just saddled teams with huge salary commitments. And other than Mahomes, no team has won the Super Bowl with a quarterback that takes so much money. So,
right.
and so I guess you could say Lamar Jackson, he won an MVP, but you know, um, yeah, I would, yeah, but still, if I were the Jets, though, I would go Lamar Jackson over Aaron Rodgers, just because you Aaron Rodgers maybe is 1 year,
Yeah,
and then you're at the same place you were. I guess you could maybe think that Zach Wilson might be better 1 year from now.
Yeah. Or if they
I
can
don't
find
know.
some value somewhere in this year's draft or the following year's draft. I think you really want 2 years out of Rodgers if he's going to do it. You'd want him to commit for 2. I don't know if
Yeah,
he'll do that, but
yeah. But if I were like,
especially if it
at,
costs like number 1 picks to get him and you have to draft a guy, you don't have anything to draft with anymore because you had to give your draft picks
that's
to
right.
get Rodgers here, right? So,
I don't. Yeah, if I were the NFC South, even the AFC South, like if you're Tennessee, if you're like maybe if you're Tennessee, you could maybe you could say, well, we'll trade Tannehill for Jackson, and maybe we can get, if we have to send two firsts, maybe we can get something else for Tannehill. Like, there's like a tandem trade, so maybe we can get some draft capital back. We're
yeah.
sending Tannehill. He's got a lot of money, but he's not as much money as.
Well, so if they work out a trade, it's not necessarily the 2 draft picks.
Okay, okay.
It's just that if they sign him through this mechanism where Baltimore has a chance to match the offer that comes in, because if they don't match, then they get 2 draft picks as a compensation for that losing the player, right?
Yeah,
So
yes,
if they wanted to sign him to like a 1-year deal and then trade him, I think they take the dead cap hit for whatever's left on the contract. But they may not have to do they may not request the picks. Maybe they just want to get rid of them. Right. But then
yeah, yeah. Maybe so. Like if
but
you said
they would want something in return for it though.
like if you got Tannehill, like so you would only have to have Tannehill for 1 year because his contract only lasts this
Yeah.
season. So you'd be spent. So right now, as looking at his contract, Tannehill has a $36.6 billion cap hit this year.
Yeah.
So take Tannehill for 1 year, get rid of Jackson. Maybe you could say, well, we'll take Tannehill. That will also get rid of a lot of salary for the Titans. So they would, and if they got Jackson, maybe they'd be spending 10 or 15 million more this year for
Yeah.
Jackson. And so maybe you could say, well, we'll give you, we'll take 1 first and a third or something if you give us Tannehill. And that might be a lot. Or even to say, well, we'll take your first next year and a
Yeah.
third this year for if you give us Tannehill. Because like if you had Ryan Tannehill to the Ravens, they're still pretty good. Tannehill's probably as good or better a passer than Jackson. He's not a terrible runner, but he's able to like thrive in a fairly conservative offense like they had in Tennessee. So like but like you'd say, well, Jackson, once he goes to Tennessee, he would really elevate, I think, their offense. This AFC South isn't that good. There's,
Yeah.
the Titans almost won the division last year. They probably would have won the division had Tannehill been healthy the whole year. Um,
I think to do that though, I think Jackson would have to accept the 1-year offer from Baltimore, and then Baltimore would have to trade him
the
to
32, and then I guess
whatever
if
the deal is.
Tennessee would have to have a deal in place, like, well, when we say Tennessee will say, well, we'll give you 3 years at $50 million each,
Yeah.
and then it's
That's a lot of moving parts for it to work out with a guy that doesn't have an agent. So that's what
yeah, and I think that's a
makes it
big
less
problem
likely for
because
it to happen.
an agent could find creative solutions, and
Yeah. I
somebody
think what
like
Lamar
Jackson,
Jackson's doing is just saying, like, I want 10 years, 350 million, all guaranteed. And every team in the league is going to say, I don't
no,
want to do
yeah,
that.
yeah, Jackson, I don't think is able to, without having an agent, think creatively in that kind of out of the box way because you need to actually really have a sense of the ins and outs of the salary cap and the ins and outs of how to deal and negotiate with people. And this is something that agents are, they're trained lawyers, almost all of them.
Right.
And
I think what
it's,
maybe the most important part of it, though, too, for having the agent is the agent can hear what the team says negatively about the player and not take it personally.
mhm,
Because if Lamar Jackson's negotiating for himself, and the team's going to say, I don't want to pay that much for this player because of this, he is going to take that very personally.
And the agent really
Try to
also
talk down
is
the contract
is
number.
somebody that can have a real kind of unbiased look, or at least less biased look at the player's actual value, and say this is
Yeah.
what's being offered, this is what you should take, this is what I can get, and it may not be what you want. Or we could say, well, you know, in some ways, because you've been hurt the last couple of years, teams are not willing to shell out the money they were, and maybe if you get a shorter deal and you prove that you can play on that, you're still young in 3 years,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to get a big deal later or something like that. And I think not having that option is really hurt them, and it just, yeah, I don't know any, I don't again, it would seem like to go against every sort of advice. Like, why wouldn't you want a professional advisor and negotiator helping you in that way?
Fighting
So
for
because
you to be
and
your
because
advocate.
they want you to make as much money too, because they have
They
a
get paid
commission,
more than too.
they get paid more. Yeah, and it's insane.
Yeah,
Um,
it's. I
but
don't believe anybody else does this. It's not like there are attorney football players that you know that do this on their own anyway. It's not.
sometimes ex-players become agents later, but
Yeah,
Jackson
but I mean,
in
I don't think there's anybody in the league right now that doesn't have an agent of some kind.
I would say possibly maybe teams that are just drafting players because they have slots. They've already pre-negotiated salaries. So maybe some, like,
Yeah, but I
you know,
mean,
if it,
you're not negotiating in that
it's
case.
like,
You're just
like, yeah, maybe a
yeah,
fifth round draft pick, there's a salary scale you have to be put in. And
yeah.
this is, we don't have an agent yet, but you get one probably for your next contract or something like that. But yeah, it's insane that he does not have an agent. Um, but there have been there haven't been a lot of changes in um, free agency in the last, like, after the first week or so. It's really cooled down. Probably won't be a whole lot happening till the draft, but they did have some news today that there were some rule changes the NFL has adopted, and I was wondering what you thought of these, Andrew. Let me read.
I have not heard any of this, so I don't even know what you're about to tell me. So this will be an unbiased and unfiltered, uninformed response.
Okay, so probably the most, I don't know if this is the most interesting, but A, perhaps the most interesting, but B, probably also the least, in terms of its effect of the actual project of the field, is that
Impactfulness factor of zero.
impactfulness. Yeah. So now teams can use the number zero
Oh,
for any of their players. Um, anybody can wear the number zero, except I think for linemen, kickers, and punters as well. Kind of related to this, can use any number from 0 to 49 and 90 to 99.
but is the double zero available, or is it just the single zero?
I believe it's just the single zero, not the double zero. So, um, would you pick zero?
I mean, I wouldn't be on an NFL roster. Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, sure. I would.
You
I
think so?
would take.
If you think zeros should be on it, should double zero be available as well, or do you
It's
think
more
just,
ridiculous than zero, so yes. I think
how about,
you should have some people with like half numbers or something too. They
or
should.
irrational numbers, pi,
Yes, that'd be best.
e?
Square root of 7.
Well, as rosters expand and numbers get retired, maybe this is something that will have to happen, because there are 90 people on an NFL roster at the beginning of the year, and
Right.
I think usually they double up a couple of them, but
Yeah.
adding zero gives a little bit of room, and I think most players, especially coming out of college, because I think traditionally college players, the playmakers would have lower numbers, like quarterback style numbers, whereas in the NFL, wide receivers used to always be in the 80s,
Yeah.
and running backs in the 20s through 40s. Whereas I think people like picking college they were number one or something or things like that. So I kind of like the zero as well.
So what position do you think will most commonly occupy the zero number this coming
Um,
season?
I think it's going to be wide receivers. I think the wide receiver group tends to, I would say on average, the receiver is the most probably flamboyant and kind of braggadocious of
Yeah,
any NFL position group. And
yeah,
so I think zero is new and shiny, and it involves a kind of look at me kind of thing. I think it's going to be maybe a running back or something like that as well. But it's going to be a player of that type, I would guess.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say that maybe they should just say that like if they have a team has a designated kick returner, that should be the number zero
Hmm.
because it's like the wild card sort of role. That player typically would be a wide receiver though anyway, right?
Yes.
Maybe in this,
Uh,
but
yeah, the other rules aren't that unusual or different. A lot of them are just kind of how the rosters work and what days like waiver pickups can be. But there
ooh,
are but there are a
into the exciting part of football.
yeah, yeah. But there are a few um like there's like a play clock adjustment during replay or something that's different slightly. Um uh One was approved that replay officials can review are going to automatically perhaps review fourth down
Oh,
conversions or not conversions. Tripping is now a personal foul rather than its own penalty of, I believe, 10 yards. Now it's a 15-yard penalty.
okay.
Um, for some reason, they decided to make the penalty for illegally handing the ball forward consistent with other illegal acts, such as the illegal forward pass. I don't recall an illegal handing the ball forward call ever in games that I've watched, but maybe it's something.
It must have
Um,
happened at some point, or why would they make a
yeah.
deal about it? So
The penalty for illegal punts, drop kicks, or place kicks is consistent with illegal forward passes as well. I don't think there are many of those either. Uh, uh, I guess you weren't allowed to end the first half on any kind of penalty, including offensive penalties. So,
oh,
like in the end of the game cannot be extended by an offensive penalty, but apparently the end of the first half could be extended by an offensive penalty. So that has gone away.
okay.
I guess that
Now
makes things
the
more
now
fun.
the two halves are consistent with each other.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, there's been a
Okay.
lot of like weird little things. Um, a couple of the big ones that weren't approved though were this idea that Philadelphia had was like the idea of a instead of an onside kick, you could do a 4th and 20 play from your own 20-yard line, uh,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and make that was turned
I
down.
kind of like that concept. Like you have to do something to do that's still hard, but it's not
Yeah,
so
does it seem
hard
too
as the onside kick seems to be like nearly impossible at this
does it
point.
seem too gimmicky? Is it too XFL-y? Is that why?
Well, were they also considering the kickoff rules from the XFL?
They were considering one where they could um, that all touchbacks would be at the 25 now. So like a punt touchback instead of landing at the 20 would be 25. And also if you called a fair catch
You
on a
get it.
kickoff or a
That's the
punt,
college rule.
I think a punt as well, you would
Yeah,
get it at the 25. I don't know if it was a punt, but at least a kickoff, you would get it at the 25, and that was turned
yeah.
down. I like the current way. I like kind of like the current way. Actually, I would prefer the touchback to
Did you
be
like
at the
have you seen the XFL kickoffs though, where they'll instead of the line of scrimmage being like where the ball is kicked off from, it's like at the other 30, so that all the players are lined up way downfield from the kicker, so that there's not as much time for the uh the kick defending team to like build up the full head of steam to like not like
yeah,
crush someone, and so they only had like 30 yards I think to
yeah.
what was it from the 40, was it 40 yards instead of
I don't. Yeah, it's something
70
strange.
yards away. So,
I guess like some of the rules the way they are, rather than
Yeah,
just to change them for changing's sake.
yeah,
The other thing that didn't get changed, and this wasn't didn't even make it like past the committee, was the idea that the what you call the so-called tush push, which I don't care for that term, but the it rhymes, but it's
yeah.
unseemly to me.
It's
But
just
the
too
idea that
vulgar.
yeah, the idea that you can just the sort of patent Philadelphia Eagles third down, fourth down sneak, where just have four guys push Jalen Hurts, and he's never on the ground, so they never end up calling forward progress down, and so like they get it 99% of the time they get the fourth and one, third and one.
Yeah.
That was not dealt with, but so it seems like perhaps that we're going to get a whole slew of that this coming season. This kind
Well,
of
you think
agreed
more teams will
rugby
adopt that
scrub.
play?
I think the only way for that play to get outlawed is that the Chiefs adopt the play and do well on it, because if something benefits the Chiefs, it gets done away with,
Yeah.
such as the overtime rules where the Buffalo Bills were not allowed to have the ball in overtime. But when the Chiefs were not allowed to have the ball in overtime against the Patriots in 2018 AFC Championship game, nothing was changed. So
They did not
it
change
needs
the
it needs,
rule.
it needs to harm the Buffalo Bills. So somehow,
Yeah.
if the Buffalo Bills get harmed by it, but those are the main rule changes. I don't know if but there's still a lot of NFL offseason left. We have the draft coming up in April. We have probably some free agency signings after that, but so far the Chiefs haven't really done a whole lot. They've actually are still the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl, but they've actually gone. Their odds have gotten a little bit higher. They were at plus 550, now they're plus 600 to win. So I think the Chiefs, the pundits and the bettors have been underwhelmed by the Chiefs' free agency signings, which have basically been uh, really next to nothing when it comes to offensive playmakers, and I think that's what really moves
Well,
the
they've only like covered the glaring holes immediately that they have from the big name players that have left on defense.
and I guess they've lost Juju
And
Smith-Schuster,
yeah, so
so
that's the only one they haven't filled yet. But I think they're planning on filling that through the
the
draft.
draft. Yeah, so that's coming up. But between the draft and future free agency, we have Major League Baseball coming. It's been announced that the Royals are starting Zach Greinke on Thursday against the Twins. Are you excited to see him on opening day? Would you rather see him, or do you think Brady Singer probably deserved the opening?
I think it should be Singer. I don't think Greinke should have started last year's opening day, let alone this one. But he does seem to be still quite the character. Uh, did you see that? There was like a TikTok about Greinke explaining his final spring training appearance.
Yes, he
Uh,
basically thought that he was doing too well in spring training and wasn't able to practice um, his pickoff moves and other types of pitches with players on base. So he allowed intentionally many hits. He also began practicing his kind of eephus pitches and his extremely slow balls and things like that, just to be very Zach Greinke like. He is the most one of the most entertaining characters baseball, especially these last couple of decades, has had for sure. He is really kind of a throwback to the kind of oddity character days of baseball, and I'm really glad the Royals have brought him back. So I think he deserves to be opening, because it doesn't really matter who pitches opening day. It's
yeah,
actually kind of an honor. Like in some ways, you can say, well, Greinke deserves it because he's done so much for baseball, so much for the Royals. He's the elder statesman at this point,
all
and
true.
he might take the pressure off of Singer if he doesn't have to pitch opening day. So yeah, at you
It's
know at one point
fine.
at one point we thought Greinke, the pressure would get to him, but I think he's moved beyond that now. Like he was he had social anxiety disorder probably, and some other um probably maybe autism spectrum kind of things. I don't want to diagnose him, but he is a person who has certain ticks and quirks, and it seemed like the game in some ways was kind of overwhelming for him, and he wanted just to step out of the spotlight. But now I think he's kind of embraced it because he doesn't care anymore, and he just
Yeah,
wants to be himself. And I think that's really good for the Royals, and so I'm glad that Greinke is starting. We also called up a couple of old, perhaps washed up veterans that have had success in the past, in Franmil Reyes and Jackie Bradley Jr. as they've made the opening day 25-man, 26-man maybe now roster.
And Matt Duffy also.
And Matt Duffy. Which of those three is going to have the most success for the Royals this year?
Well, I think Jackie Bradley Jr. probably has the most opportunity to play regularly. I'm not sure that Franmil Reyes is going to be an everyday player based on their roster. It seems like they may have, you know, opportunity for Reyes to play at first and DH a lot, but I think for now, maybe Jackie Bradley Jr. may be this opening day starting center fielder potentially, since they already have an injury there for their expected center fielder, so they're already kind of filling in with what Nate Eaton I think is going to be there a lot of the time, but we'll have to see how it goes. They haven't announced the official opening day lineup yet, so I think Jackie Bradley Jr. probably has the most opportunity to play, so I think he'll be there most of the time.
None of those, yeah, none of those three had a good season last year. Jackie Bradley Jr. had an OPS plus of 58. He had a WAR of minus 0.6. Matt Duffy had a WAR of minus 0.4. OPS plus of 77. And Franmil Reyes has a WAR of minus 0.9, OPS plus of 81. But recently, though, they have, not as recently, but they have all had success at the major league level.
We think Duffy's going to be a backup middle infielder, so he won't be starting.
He is a good fielder, or average, adequate fielder, I guess.
Yeah. Bradley Jr. maybe center fielder initially, but will probably, unless he's amazing, may slip back into a platoon type role.
Yeah, Bradley has been an excellent fielder.
Yeah.
And he's actually been an excellent hitter as well. He's had some very solid seasons. That was probably 6 or 7 years ago, however, but in Boston. And yeah, I don't know if any of those players could. I think Reyes maybe has the chance to at least hit a bunch of home runs, but I like having some name guys on the team.
Yeah,
just maybe to take some of the pressure off the younger players.
Well, it is good to see these guys they signed to, like, you know, minor league contracts or non-roster invitees, and have them make the rosters. That's already a big plus, right? For the for the franchise and for those players. So it's great.
Yeah,
great
I think and the idea, I guess, is you can keep some of the young players in the minors a little bit longer to develop. If even as an optimist, you can say, well, maybe they're failures because they couldn't beat out Jackie Bradley Jr. or couldn't beat out Franco Reyes, but you can also say, well, they just need a little more time to develop. This helps the Royals minor league teams do a little better, and at least gives these guys, at worst these guys are placeholders and can at least.
Well, they could be trade pieces too if they could get, somebody at the deadline to fill up that minor league roster a bit more too, if they're worried that they've depleted it so much that they're actually behind where they should be developmentally.
So I think we were both a little bit optimistic about the Royals this year. One of the things I think we wanted to do is to talk a little bit about our prognostications for the Royals, maybe some other teams this year. Right now, the Royals are projected, according to Las Vegas and Fangraphs, I think, or FanDuel especially, they have their projected win total right now is 68.5. So that means over they would be 69-93, under they would be 68-94. Do you think the Royals will win more than 68.5 games this year, or fewer than 68.5 games this year?
So they won 64 or 5 games last year? 65.
Yeah, they were 65 and 97.
So they would only need to improve by 4 games over last season. And I think they're better than that. I know you and I had talked the last couple weeks about predictions. I think I'm a little more optimistic than you were.
I think at one point I
Um,
was thinking maybe they might even be 77.
Mid to upper 70s.
Yeah, I would say closer to mid 70s now is my so
Yeah,
68 and a half I think is a little low. So I was thinking they probably win 74, 75 games is my, and if they finish close to 500, that'll be a success, real success. So I would say
yeah,
over on 68.5. How about you?
yeah. At the height of spring training, when they were, like 14-2, I think I'd gone as high as nearly 500. I think I've relaxed back a bit after that, after their end of spring training anyway. So I still think higher than 68 and a half. I still think, yeah, mid 70s seems pretty good.
They
Mid to
ended up
upper
at
70s.
19 and 12 right now in spring training. So
Yeah,
still a, if they were 19 and 12 in the regular season, 7 games of 500, that's a great
be in great position.
uh start. But yeah, so but it's not 14 and 2. It's not, so they ended up going 5 and 10 in their last 15 games. So yeah, I still think over 68 and a half. So I would say mid 70s is my prediction. So if we were to bet on these on the Royals, we would both be over. And I thought we could also make season long bets on some other teams, and kind of, again, as we often do on this program, compare our results to one another and see who is the smarter prognosticator. And as of now, so we of course we're going to be both over on the Royals because we both are Royals homers. But when it comes to other teams, we might have different opinions. So I thought we could each pick three other teams and their over under totals this year, and make bets on those. Of course, we won't find out until early October what these are. So
Right. This will be by
um,
far our longest you know, distance away from a
I
bet.
guess they could cash out technically earlier, or we could lose earlier if
They are
they
so
do.
amazing.
Yeah,
They get to 68 wins by the All-Star break.
yeah. So the Royals
Or
are six. Yeah, they're 68 and 35 or something at some point, and then we can
yeah,
think, well, unless they lose their next 55 games, we're gonna be fine
right.
here. Um, so um, I've scoured the statistics and the odds, and I've made my own picks. I believe you've made yours as well. Why don't we reveal those, and then we can wrap up today's Morning Trek Power Hour. So my first pick, um, Boston Red Sox were over under 78 and a half. I believe they were at 78 wins last year. And I, the Red Sox, they aren't, I don't think Boston fans and management are going to be satisfied if they, you know, I don't think they're going to go back to the old Red Sox where they were often losers. I think in this current market, they're supposed to be a good team, and they've been spending a little bit more money lately. So I think they're 78 and a half. I took the over on 78 and a half. So I think they'll be at least close to a 500, if not a little bit above a 500 this year.
Well, and a lot of that may come down to Baltimore success. Like Baltimore ended up finishing ahead of them last year by 5 games. Do you
Yes.
think that was a mirage last season, or and they will relax back, or do you think they will become a more dominant team with their young players developing? Are they taking another step forward?
Yeah, I think that, well, I think they can still take a step forward as getting better, but their record doesn't have to be as good. So I think maybe their
Yeah,
record was a little better than what they were last time. So I think we've passed the time where like the Orioles are one of the worst two or three teams in baseball. I don't think they're going to be 55 and 107 anymore. But I think they're a decent-ish team, but but the AL East is very, very tough. The Rays are going to be okay. The Blue Jays are probably going to be pretty good still, and the Yankees are still going to be the Yankees. And I think the Red Sox are going to become the Red Sox again. So I think it's just a crowded division. And if both the Rays and the Blue Jays are doing fairly well, I think that means that one of those teams can't be doing as well. So I think I would say if I would say that the Orioles are probably going to be a little worse in terms of record, even though they're probably a better team than they were a couple of years ago. For
yeah.
Did you end up making a bet on the Orioles as a tandem
I
to
considered it. I think they will drop a few more than where they were last year. I guess I didn't pay attention to what their over under was for this coming season. Did you have to look at that one?
yeah, the over under for the Orioles this year was 76 and a half.
So they expect them to drop two,
So, so yeah,
like
so
two
the
games basically.
Boston was 78 and a half, or Orioles were 76 and a
Yeah.
half. And we went through and added all these up. It seems like there isn't a whole lot of room on these odds because all of the over unders total the wins of the whole major league of all the major leagues, it added up to almost exactly what the total would be if every major league team played its full complement of games. So the average would be 81 wins per team times 30. Um, and I think it was so that would be 24 2030 wins
Yeah.
in the season. I think in the total over unders for baseball was for the by FanDuel was 24-35. So like it was right on there. So it
There's
wasn't
only
a lot.
five extra games spread across the whole league to play with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
they
yeah.
didn't inflate everyone's numbers just to
So that's
make
one,
people
yeah,
try to
one
get the
sixth
over.
of a game
Yes.
per team.
Yeah. So
So who yeah.
my first pick, I went to a team that had 111 victories last season, the Los Angeles Dodgers, who are one of my most disliked teams, actually.
Mhm.
But their projection for this season at FanDuel was only 96 and a half wins. And I think that seems like I don't think they've really changed that much of the roster. And they seem to like if they have a problem, they just go get somebody else anyway.
Yeah.
Um, I think they
Guess they
will
lost
not
Trey
have
Turner. Yeah.
that much of a difficulty, getting back to that 100-ish win season. So I'll take the over on the 96 and a half.
I think that's a good pick. I my next one, I actually kind of since I thought the Royals would improve, I kind of did a tandem, a little bit the way you were thinking of possibly going with Baltimore, um, going down. If Boston went up, Baltimore probably go down. I think if the Royals go up a little bit, I think their biggest competition at kind of staying uh, out of last place in the division this year is Detroit. Detroit's over under was 69 and a half. I don't think Detroit will be better than the Royals this year. And if the Royals are 68 and a half, I think Detroit should be lower than 68 and a half. So I'm going to go under on Detroit 69 and a half. So I think um, uh, that's my
Detroit won 66 games last season, so they're right in that same range. So
yeah.
it's not crazy to think that they
ESPN
could stay
also
right in
has
that range.
ESPN on their preseason picks has Detroit winning 66 and the Royals winning 72 right now. So I looked at some of those things like that, but so I think partly just because if the Royals go up, I think that Detroit will do that. So I will either probably get both of them right or get neither of them right.
Well, I
So
think the other factor that may have a lot to do with the AL Central is the White Sox were really underwhelming last year for their final record. They were just 500 for the season, and they seem to have the talent to play maybe in that upper tier of the American League. So if they do improve by where you'd expect to see them, in the standings, those wins are going to come from somewhere, probably within the division.
yeah, hopefully not from
They
the
may
Royals.
they may come at Detroit. Hopefully, from the Royals' perspective, from Detroit's
Yeah,
column. Anyways,
The White Sox are 83 and a half according to FanDuel.
so they're not really expected to improve that much, even though they'll have former Royals bench coach as their head coach, right? Isn't that
That's right.
the full?
Pedro Grifol is now the White Sox
Yeah,
manager. So maybe you could say, well, they're going to sink now because they have the Royals, and the Royals are going to be well because they have a Rays. Max Petrero's a
yeah,
Rays protege. So
yeah.
who's your third team?
Similar to your strategy, I stuck to the same division with the Dodgers too. Um, I think the Dodgers and Padres are going to be locked in this struggle to get the most wins. So I think there's going to be not as many wins available from the division. And I'm guessing that they're going to come from at the Diamondbacks expense. Their over under number is 75.5 this season. I'm going to take the under. Arizona Diamondbacks 75.5.
I could see that.
They won 74 games last year.
74 games. So you think they're not going to maybe not improve, or maybe get a little worse possibly. I think that. So I
Dodgers and Padres are just so good in that division, though.
That's
It's
right.
going to be tough. And the Rockies have been very bad, but they can't be as bad, I think, as they have been all the time. It seems like they have to improve maybe a little bit, but that's still going to come from somewhere.
My last pick was a little bit like yours. I decided to go to the National League, and I went to a team that's also usually not very good historically, and also in a division that's tends to be pretty tough. And this is the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates are in the NL Central. The Cardinals are usually pretty good. The Brewers have been pretty good lately. The Cubs could conceivably come back this year, and they're usually battling with kind of the Reds for last place over the last few years. But I think the Pirates are making some incremental improvements. They're also the kind of most local team to me right now, and the team that, or at least the team that I like the most. That's not because of the National League, so they aren't competing directly against the Royals. So I like the Pirates a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit of Pirates homerism. I also like the Pirates a little better than some of the other Pittsburgh teams because the Pirates are not they don't have as many bandwagon and followers as perhaps the Steelers or the Penguins have. So the Pirates have an over under 67.5 wins. I'm going to say they're going to go over. So they're a little bit lower than the Royals, one game lower than the Royals. And I think the Pirates actually play in a division that's not quite as tough as. I think the Cardinals have been kind of coasting and still able to win a lot of games. I don't think they're necessarily a juggernaut in the way that I think Cleveland is really improving. I think Minnesota is pretty good, and I think the White Sox are decent. I'm not sure there are as many good teams in the NL Central, so I'm going to say the Pirates will steal a few wins. I think they won 62 last year, so if they win 68 this year, I will be on the right side. So I think Pirates over 67.5 is my last pick.
That's one of the higher, I think, improvements over last year that I saw, at least anyway, when flipping through the odds. Yeah, because to get the over, they'd have to be 6 games better than last season.
Yeah,
which is seemingly expecting to be a better team then, which is good to see, I think. But you think they can power through that, plus maybe a little more over the odds makers?
Yeah, I think yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's not a good pick or not. The Pythagorean record last year, they should have had 58 wins. So maybe they overachieved last year compared to that. But I'm not gonna let that change. I'm still gonna say we'll be at least 68 and 94.
Well, I guess this year the schedules are more balanced, though, aren't they? They're not doing the full
Well, not
19
that they're the
games
COVID
against the
types of
division
stuff.
too,
Yeah.
are they?
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't be using those numbers quite as heavily.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, too late now.
Too late now. And my last pick, I went with a team that has spent excessively in the offseason. Already had a good record last season with 101 wins, but spending even more money to try to eclipse that. Mets are their line is set at 93.5 wins. And they can be a few games worse than that this coming year, even with the higher salary, and still hit the over on that. So I'm taking the over on the Mets, 93.5.
101, so they could even lose several more. The Yankees, I think, were also 93.5 this year, so that'll be interesting. Which of the New York teams is going to do better? Maybe it's another Subway Series year, but yeah, baseball, it's a marathon, of course, and it begins in March. The end of March, March 30th. So Thursday, opening our is opening day, as is our broadcast will be on Thursday. So we've made these picks, and we'll have to wait 6 months or so to figure out how what we've done. But we won't have to wait 6 months before we come back on the air, because we'll be back in 1 week to talk about the Final Four, talk a little more about the NFL, maybe the first week of baseball. And so we haven't seen the last of the Warning Track Power Hour, that's for sure. Do we have anything to
It's
add
just
before
starting
we?
for that. It's just
We're
starting
just
for
starting up.
us.
Yeah.
I mean,
We,
we are the
we,
Warning Track Power Hour, not the NFL Power Hour, right? But that's
yeah,
what
we are at the 2 minute warning hour.
yes.
Hour.
Our season's just starting.
Yes, we were supposedly a baseball centric. I think it's because we have like our bets were slightly worse than what we should be to make a profit. So it's like the warning track. We can hit it almost out of there,
Yeah.
but we usually will end up losing a little bit of money. Just like someone with warning track power will not quite hit the home runs, will not quite get the big contract that a home run hitter will get. But we're working on it. We've spent working our spent time working our muscles this spring training, just as much as the players have, I'm sure. Our mental muscles and our you know acuity and cogitating and our cogitation cogitative acuity, we'll say. And yeah, that sounds good, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
Or CA. We'll start
It sounds
using
like
it as
something
CA.
that would have been said by the manager of the Chicago Orphans or
Yes.
the Boston Bean Eaters. Until then, though, we will keep our noses to the grindstone and follow our beloved Royals and the other teams of Major League Baseball for the next um, several months until the NFL picks up again. But we'll be back next week and we'll talk all about it. Do we have any final thoughts, or should we close in our usual way?
Sure.
Um, Thank you for listening. I am Dr. Michael Lerman. He is Dr. Andrew Scaff. We are the Warning Track Power Hour. Please like and or subscribe to our many delivery services, vehicles, options, these sorts of things. And we will be back next week with another exciting hour, or perhaps even more, as we've often been giving more than 1 hour episodes, even in the off season. It's all free. This extra time is all free for our subscribers. It costs them nothing additional, even though it takes more sweat and from our brow to put these things on. More atoms and more more bits and bytes into the ether are being used to um, uh, you know to record our extra long podcast. But we don't have to talk about that now. We'll talk about it again next week. Until then, we wish you a good day.